Hello students, today we're going to look at section 10.5, solve quadratic equations by completing the square. Now there are several ways to solve this quadratic equations. We've done it by graphing, by factoring, several other ways, but this is completing the square, and in completing the square we'll be able to factor using the perfect square trinomial, and then that will be able to give us the solution. So the first thing that we need to look at is an example of x squared plus bx. We don't have a c here because that's what we have to find. We have to find a c that will help me complete the square. So to find the c, then I'm going to take half of b, so b over 2, or half of b, and then square it, and that gives me what goes right here to complete the square. And let me just move that. So it would be plus b over 2 squared. And then to factor that, it would be x plus b over 2 squared to give me the factorization of that. Now that's just the technical, so let's look at a couple of examples to help you figure it out. Let's start with x squared plus 8x plus c. Well, what does c have to be in order for me to make a perfect square trinomial? So I take half of b, half of 8, which is 4, and I square that 4 and I get 16. So I would get x squared plus 8x plus 16 to give me the completion of the square, and then to factor that, it's x plus 4 squared. And we're going to use the factored form to help us find the solutions to our problems. So the next one we're going to look at is x squared minus 16x equals negative 15. Well, in order to solve this, I've got to complete the square for this side. I guess I probably shouldn't underline it, you don't really need to. But I need to complete the square of this part. The negative 15 is going to stay there, but I'm going to add something to both sides of my equation that give me a completed square as a trinomial. So x squared minus 16x. Now I've got to take half of negative 16, which is negative 8, and then square that, and negative 8 squared is positive 64. So I'm going to add 64 to both sides, negative 15 plus 64, and in adding 64 to both sides, now I can factor this side, and that's going to be x minus 8 squared equals 49, because negative 15 plus 64 is 49. And now we're getting to a place that we are coming familiar with. I find the square root of both sides, and to find the square root of both sides, square root of x minus 8 squared equals the square root of 49. So the square root of x minus 8 squared is just x minus 8, and the square root of 49 is plus or minus 7. I've got to keep that plus or minus part. So if x minus 8 equals plus or minus 7, then now I've got to figure out what x equals. So I'm going to do x equals 8 plus 7, or x equals 8 minus 7. And so my two solutions are, and let me adjust the camera a little bit, my two solutions then are going to be x equals 15 or 1. And so I could plug 1 or 15 into either of those, and I would end up with solutions to this equation. Let me just do a recap. First, complete the square on this side. Add that number to both sides, because that's the rule in math. What I do to one side I have to do to the other. And then go from what we've done before. Find the square root until I come up with my solutions, what x equals. Here's my next example. M squared plus 10m equals negative 8. So I'm going to do the same thing. Complete the square. M squared plus 10m plus half of 10 is 5. 5 squared is 25. So I have to add 25 to both sides. That gives me a perfect square trinomial. And you'll remember with a perfect square trinomial, square root of m squared, square root of 25 plus 5 squared equals 17. So now I'm going to find the square root of both sides. So I know that m plus 5 equals the square root of 17. So get m by itself. M equals, remember we have to put the -5 first, -5 plus or minus the square root of 17. So now I'm going to use my calculator on this one, and I'm going to calculate what is -5 plus the square root of 17, and then what is -5 minus the square root of 17. And because of the magic of the camera, I've already done that, so I'm just going to give you the answers. So m equals -9.12, or m also equals -0.88. And I got that by plugging it into my calculator. -m plus the square root of 17, and -5 plus the square root of 17, and -5 minus the square root of 17, and these are my two solutions. The last example we're going to do is 3g squared minus 24g plus 27 equals 0. And I apologize for the glare. It's the lights, it's not the camera. So what I have to do first is get this 27 to the other side. I only want to keep these two on this side so I can complete the square. So 3g squared minus 24g equals -27. That way now I can find the number that I need for a perfect square. But before that, I have a greatest common factor. So let's factor that 3 out. I'm going to divide everything by 3, and so that would be g squared minus 8g equals -9. I just factored out that 3. I don't need to worry about it. I can just get rid of it because I did the same thing to both sides. Now I've got to figure out what number goes right here. Well, I take half of 8, which is -4. -4 squared is positive 16. So I want to add 16 to both sides in order to complete the square. So g squared minus 8g plus 16 equals -9 plus 16. Now I factor this and I get g minus 4 squared. Notice that every time we take half of that 8, that's what goes here in the parentheses, equals 7. Find the square root of both sides. G minus 4 equals the square root of 7. Well, the square root of 7 is not an integer. It's some crazy decimal, so we're going to let our calculators do the work. So G equals 4 plus or minus the square root, oh, that is a really bad square root sign, the square root of 7, and I'm going to use my handy dandy calculator, and I'm going to plug it into the calculator. 4 plus the square root of 7 and 4 minus the square root of 7, and I get G equals 1.35, or G equals 6.65. Just to recap, if I'm given a trinomial, the first thing I need to do is to move the constant to the other side. This looks like it's C, but it doesn't make a perfect square, so I can't use that one. Then if I have a greatest common factor, I can factor it out. Then I find the number to complete the square, half of b squared, and then do the rest. It's not hard, but there's a lot more steps to it. And I need you to do all of those steps and write those out. Now here are your 3 practice problems for tonight. The first one says find C to make a perfect square trinomial for x squared minus 12x plus c. What does c have to be to make a perfect square trinomial? The second one and the third one are solved by completing the square. X squared minus 2x equals 3. So I need to complete the square, plug it in here. And 2x squared plus 20x minus 8 equals 0. Move a to the other side first. Plug in the c that will complete the square, and then solve both of those. Take a picture of your work. I need to see the work, not just the answer. Show me your work. Take a picture of the work, submit it through Edmodo, and we'll do more of this in class tomorrow.